After winter, I always feel the urge to make something that doesn't demand attention. Not something bold or loud, but something gentle enough to exist quietly alongside the change that's already happening. Winter takes a certain kind of energy. Even when it's beautiful, it asks you to endure, to embrace yourself, to wait. And then slowly, almost without warning, that weight begins to lift. These hanging eggs came from that moment, not the arrival of spring, but the noticing of it. They're small and deliberately simple, just tiny clay sculptures held to something already fragile. There's no attempt to disguise what they are or make them more than they need to be. I like that about them. They feel like objects you might discover rather than arrange, something tucked into a corner or hanging near a window, turning slightly as the air moves through the room. Spring rarely announces itself in grand gestures. It arrives in fragments, in softened light, in mornings that feel a little less sharp than the ones before. While I'm sculpting, I'm thinking about that transition, about how change often happens while we're busy with something else. Hands working, mind wandering, and suddenly you realize you're not where you were anymore. The clay holds that feeling well. It responds slowly. It asks for patience without ever rushing you towards a result. There's something grounding about making pieces this small. They ask you to pay attention, to slow your movements, to accept imperfection without trying to correct it. Painting them feels like the point where they begin to settle into themselves, not becoming something new, just becoming clearer. I'm not trying to make them shout spring. I want them to feel like they belong to it naturally, as if they've always been part of this time of year and are simply finding their place again. The colours don't need much from me, just enough guidance to let them settle where they want to be. I'm not aiming for precision here. I want the brushstrokes to stay visible, so the surface keeps a sense of movement, as if the pieces are still in the process of becoming. There's something comforting about this stage. The clay is no longer asking questions. It's already decided what it will be. All that's left is to respond gently. I keep thinking about early spring while I paint, about muted tones and soft contrasts, about colour returning gradually, rather than all at once. Nothing too fresh, nothing too bright, just enough warmth to suggest what's coming. This is the moment where the pieces start to belong together, not as individual objects, but as part of the same quiet conversation. When the paint dries, they feel settled, not finished, just at ease, and that makes the next step feel natural, like something that was always meant to follow. When the clay is glued to the eggs, it feels almost like a quiet joining. Two delicate things trusting each other to hold. There's a vulnerability there that I like. Nothing reinforced, nothing overworked. It feels careful, intentional, unrushed. These aren't centerpieces. They don't need to be admired closely or understood. They're meant to live at the edges of a space, noticed in passing, remembered later. They're a soft opening, a way of easing into a season, rather than marking it with a ceremony. As part of a wider collection, they matter because of what they don't do. They don't dominate. They don't explain themselves. They simply create a feeling that everything else can grow from. A kind of clearing, a pause before the meadow fills. There's something grounding about remembering that these aren't symbols first. They're real. Handled, gathered, offered. Spring doesn't start as an idea. It starts here, with routine, with care, with small lives going about their business, regardless of whether we stop to notice.